Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast. In these sessions, we meet the most amazing and interesting people. We learn about their passions, their business models, cool new technologies, and of course, their lessons on personal growth. I hope you enjoy. In this Boardroom Session podcast, we meet Ken Lubin, Managing Director at ZRG Partners, an executive search firm. He lives in Boston. He runs a podcast called The Ultimate Hire Podcast, where he interviews his folks. He's an executive athletes blog and podcast and group leader. He's been a U.S. Olympic Committee career advisor. He's an endurance athlete, part of the Spartan family, and many, many other things. Ken and I have a great conversation here around building your personal brand, around his three key pillars: family, finances, and fitness. We talk about post-COVID and quarantine growth sectors. We talk about advice for executives in transition and have a really fun time here. I think you'll enjoy. Ken Lubin, welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
This is amazing. Thanks, Mike, for having me on. I'm super excited.
I'm excited. I feel like you're a doppelganger. You do a lot of the same things that I do. You operate with the same operating system, and so I've been super excited for this. You and I got introduced by a buddy of mine and a client of yours, Dave Rhoades, over at Blue Street Capital.
Great guy. He's actually been on both of my podcasts that I've done. I love his thought pattern. I love what he's doing, and he's doing some cool, disruptive things, and it's a fun process to see.
Yep, he's my partner in crime. We spend most mornings out running trails or surfing or paddleboarding or doing something fun like that and sharing stories. So he had a lot of really good things to say about you. You're the managing director at ZRG Partners, executive search firm, and you live in Boston area?
I do, yeah. I'm about 50 miles west of Boston in the hills of central Massachusetts.
Oh, it sounds beautiful. And cold at times, I bet.
Yeah, it's cold. There was snowing 2 weeks ago, and this is the week after Memorial Day, and it was still snow in the air, which is not unheard of, but it was a long winter.
Yeah, I bet. We don't have those here in Southern California. You also run the Ultimate Hire blog and podcast, right? And so I've heard some amazing guests that you've had on there, some big time CEOs and big time folks with thought leaders in various different businesses. And you're also running a podcast called The Executive Athletes. And not only that seems to be a large community, and I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about that as well. So we'll just go down the resume here a little bit longer. You are a U.S. Olympic Committee career advisor. We're going to dive into that a second. And an endurance athlete, right? And so we'll talk about a lot of those different things. But how did you get into the blogging podcast business, especially around your work? How did you and when did you think that would be a good idea?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the history of how I ended up where I am right now. So I'll give you a 3 or 4 minute overview. But I started in the search business, and this is the whole part of how I got into the blogging and podcasting thing, but 20 years ago. In 1999, and I think the only credential at that point was to be able to fog a mirror, and I could probably fog a mirror better than most because I was working out all the time. I started here at ZRG Partners in 2002, and I'm the longest tenured employee and pretty much the first employee within the organization. Back in 08 and 09, my executive search business crashed. I was doing a lot of lending, a lot of banking, a lot of specialty money type stuff. And as we know, lending went away very quickly during 08 and 09. So I really taught myself how to learn LinkedIn and really master that as a tool, as a networking tool, because that was a up and coming tool that was there. And I created 3 different groups. I created a group called Executive Athletes, which is what you talked about. It's a community. And I started that out of the fact that if I was going to cold call people or talk to people that are going to refer business back and forth, I might as well connect with people like myself. I figured there had to be other people out there, and it's remarkable how many people there are. I would put on networking events. I would get speakers to come. I would do it in Boston, New York, and in a cool setting. And it was a blast, but it became pretty time consuming. It became a party planner more than I was doing other stuff.
And that was just to build a community of like-minded athletes.
It was great. It was getting people together. It was getting people, to connect, who can connect face to face. You do it at a cool bar, you put a couple drinks in front of people, and you never know what deals can happen, right?
It's sure.
a great thing.
Right.
So I was doing that, and then that turned into a podcast. The Executive Athletes podcast I launched a couple of years ago. And it's obviously started by interviewing my friends on that one, and that's grown. Still got a big community, like you said. I'm doing a lot of cool things with different business partners that'll be launching out more that you'll be seeing. But that one has been great. But in the same sentence, this COVID thing hit. I had a blog, The Ultimate Hire, that I would use for all things for myself, search related, the roles I was working on, my thought leadership, a place to write, a place to just put stuff down on paper, the proverbial paper, but online.
Mm-hmm.
When this hit, I said, hey, I figured out the podcasting thing with executive athletes. Let's try it with this. And that's, I've done about 20 episodes right now. I did it with a lot of people internally, with ZRG Partners, other CEOs, and I'll be posting some other great CEO interviews coming up here. But
that's a good way to get exposure for your clients, right? It's a good way to get exposure for your placement people, right? It's good exposure for your company. I heard a couple of your ZRG partner folks, and those folks are extremely knowledgeable about their sectors and their business, right? They're experts in that, in their field. So I found it entertaining to listen to as a business fan.
They're way smarter than I am. I can say that. I can ask the questions, but they're the ones with the brains that are behind it. But like you said, it's getting thought leaders. It's understanding, unique business nuance of different segments, because it's all so different, from retail to consumer and retail, but to life sciences, to manufacturing, to all of these tools. And if you can learn something from listening to something for a half an hour, it's amazing. Number one. Number two, we're all boardroom people here that are listening, high-level executives. It's great personal branding. It's great personal branding for myself, the listener. It's great branding because they're the expert, and it's great for our organization because it's given us content to share in the web sphere.
That's great. I like to listen to it. I'm a huge podcast fan. That's why I got into the podcast business, right? And like you, what you did with executive athletes, I have a networking group, right? It's IT executives and technology executives that we network and meet with. And that was to build a community, and it turns into some business, and it turns into some coaching opportunities too, right? So folks need some advice. They need to work the network. Hey, who do you know over here? Who do you know over there? Could you make an introduction to me? Or what do you know is going on in this sector or that sector? And as a consultant who's pretty active, I can get some advice there. And I see that you do a really good job of coaching throughout your business as well. And so again, the alignment there is just striking to me that you coach for a living, right? You both coach athletes, you coach folks for roles, you coach firms that are looking for the new role on how to find those right people. So talk to me about your coaching background and how that you interwove that into your life.
Yeah. So when I came out of school, I was going to live the life. I was going to coach ski racing in North America in the winter, and then go to South America in the summer, or New Zealand or wherever. And my girlfriend at the time, now wife, put a squash to that. So that was the end of that. But I still love to do it. And I still was coaching kids at that point on the weekends. I have 2 kids now that are racing, and obviously I'm probably coaching
ski racing
more. Yeah, ski racing. I'm probably coaching the parents more than I'm coaching kids in that world, but that's a whole other story. But it's one of those things where I'm just trying to share knowledge, right? Just share what I've learned from other individuals like yourself, or being the people I interview on my podcast, or anything else. I'm great at regurgitating great stories, I think is really what it is. But if anyone comes to me with a question or comment or concern or wondering what if or whatnot, if I don't know the answer, I'll go find it. But through so many people I've talked to, it's like, here, think about this or think about that. And that's the way that I really, do my coaching. It's not like, who is the basketball coach there throwing chairs, do it my way or the highway. It's really, here, help figure it out, right? Versus, and I want them to figure it out. I don't need to figure it out for them. I want them to figure out, because they're going to figure it out differently than I'm going to tell them, but I try to give them the tools to do it.
And it sounds to me like from listening to the way you're interacting and from talking to one of your clients and Dave Rhoades, that you have integrated that coaching mindset, if you will, into what you do, into the conversations that you have with people. And was that a conscious thought, or is that just something that has just kind of morphed over time?
I think it's just morphed over time, right? When I got into this business, and like any salesperson, for the first 10 years, I had like zero confidence in myself and the whole business. And I think a lot of it was I was trying to be someone different. And that was, I always thought you had to be a salesman, you had to be the proverbial car salesman and close the people right then and there. And that wasn't me. That wasn't my style. And when I realized that I had, a bit of expertise and fill it in with sort of authenticity and being yourself, things really started going, becoming much better.
Yeah, that same thing happened for me, and it was an epiphany. It was a complete anvil on the forehead. That was I'm here to help, right? And as a sales individual, you're often thinking about how there's this transaction in the middle, right? There's some contract that needs to get signed at some point, right? But when I removed all of that and approached every situation the same way I would, like, what can I bring to the table here? What can I give? And if, the reciprocation is a connection, right? That connection turns into a deal for somebody, and that's where the business happens for me. And so I'm here to help. And once I made that, change and shift in my life, my whole world changed. Everything changed for me. And, so I see that in you. I see that coach in you, and I admire that. Tell me a little bit about what it is to be a career advisor for the U.S. Olympic Committee.
So that was something I was asked to do a few years ago. I've done 3 or 4 different athletes through this, and not just Olympic athletes, but other athletes, really making the transition, right? The life transition from athlete to real world, if whatever the real world is. And I don't know, it's changing every day right now, regardless. But so it was talking with individuals who had their identity. So, that's who they are. That's their identity, is their sport. I'm a triathlete, I'm a runner, I'm a skier, I'm this, I'm that. And they never have really thought of themselves outside of that. And that's a tough thing to do. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a psychologist and talking about the identity, but I could talk to them about how I made the transition. I was never an Olympic athlete, but I was coaching. I was, as a Division I ski racer in college. I semi-pro mountain biker and that type of stuff. And really what it was here's an opportunity to try to share some of my struggles and knowledge of making that transition. And that's really the whole thing. That's how that whole thing happened. Okay.
And so what is different about an Olympic athlete versus, like, say, an NFL player or somebody like that? I would imagine it's the transition of being sponsored and having, various brands that you're wearing and various things of that nature. There could be a very easy path for some of those folks. I live here in Southern California, right? And we have a lot of athletes here that are surfers, and they're 17 and 18 years old, and they transition very easily. I mean, they leave the surfing world, and when the tour's over and the ticker tape stops, they know when that happens, they're not on the tour anymore. It's that brutal of an environment. But they've got Hurley, Quicksilver, Nike. Somebody's giving them a nice transition into what we call the bro circuit, and they start working in the sportswear business. And there's a bunch of them here. So,
and that happens, right? For a lot of those athletes, that's what they do. They'll go into the bike business, or they'll go into the ski business or any of that. But for some, they don't want to do that, right? But they don't really know how to navigate to sort of their next phase in their life of where they're going to go to becoming a family person or becoming a parent or becoming that. The good thing about Olympians is, not a lot of them making a lot of money. So it's different than, say, the NFL or NBA or any of the pro sports where they're going from, 7 figures to 0 figures, right? It's a lot different. And many of the Olympic sports are individual based sports as well. A lot of them aren't team sports. If you really look at it, there's not a lot of team sports in the Olympics. So it's more self-reliant. It's remember that, go out there and keep on training. Nowadays, you can talk to them about personal branding. Start personal branding before you even make the transition. Start thinking about those types of things, because those are pieces of the puzzle that are huge that they're not even thinking about. And I actually learned that from a cross-country skier in Great Britain who had reached out to me saying, "Hey, am I doing the right things? I'm writing, I'm blogging." I'm like, yeah, you're doing all the right things. But it was fascinating to see. She was one of the only ones that I had ever seen have the foresight to actually start thinking about that, of making the transition. Because a lot, like, same with the military as well. Once you're out, you're out. And then there's not a lot of organizations or people that help individuals make those transitions.
Sure. For some of the top Olympic athletes, those folks have worked on a brand for their whole life, their whole career, right? They have, you think of Apollo Ono and was that Apollo Ono? Is that his name? He always had that headband on, and they were trademarking these little looks that they have. You think of the guys on the PGA, every one of those guys, how different can you look in a golf shirt and pants, right? But boy, did they work on it, right? Jasper Parnevik used to flip his hat up, all these guys would have some kind of trademark logo look that they would get. So yeah, building that personal brand is something that you don't have to be an athlete to work on. You have one. I'm watching it. Yeah. And so that's good advice. And again, there's the coach in you, bringing that out in those people and helping coach them. Speaking of that, let's talk about endurance athletes, being an endurance athlete, right? So you've done ultras, you've done adventure races, you're part of the Spartan family, which is a whole segment of conversation here. How did you get into the endurance athlete game?
So it started by training for ski racing. I got into that. Then I started bike racing to stay in shape for ski racing and got faster on my bike. And then it just sort of gets longer, faster, better, right? I sort of got burnt out just doing the weekend warrior thing and mountain bike racing or road racing, and wanted to go to things that are a little bit longer. So I started pushing, finding events that I would do 2 or 3 big ones a year, and then, smaller stuff or whatever. Before I had kids, but that was really for me to make a transition out of sport was, here, I want to still train. I love the feeling of training. I don't need to be driving all over the place to win $50 at a bike race or mountain bike race or whatever it was. Back then, actually, the money was way better in the 90s and 80s. But so then I had always watched like Eco Challenge. And funny thing is, a guy I interviewed for my Executive Athletes podcast, Ian Adamson, yesterday was one of the pioneers behind Eco Challenge and adventure racing. And I was like, I want to do that. And I never knew how to do it. And, just sort of kept progressing to become longer, faster, better. And a lot of people ask me how I did it when I had kids and with a career. And I bought one of those Bob baby joggers that are probably the most rugged things in the world. And I would just go out for 2-3 hour runs pushing my kids, or one kid at first and then 2 kids. And my wife never said, don't go take the kids, right? So I could go for the day. Of course not, yeah. For, as long as I want. I'd bring snacks, I'd bring lunch, you could put your money in it, you could stop and get, whatever you need along the way.
Kids are content, the view's changing, and they're bouncing around, they can take a nap anytime.
It was win-win. So I did a lot of training during that time when there were kids doing stuff that way. So what did I do? Just got into it. I won the Spartan Death Race one year, the Ultra Beast. I've now, like you said, we'll talk about that whole side of things, then got into doing like Untamed New England, which is a multi-day adventure race the last few years. So it's good.
What is one of the craziest portions of an adventure race that you've done? I mean, for those listeners that are not real familiar, we're talking about scaling man-made obstacles. We're talking about mind games in the middle of a very fatigued environment. We're talking about day 2 of a race, having to scale some lake or what have you on improv devices. What give us one of those?
So I'll give you 2. There's the death race was one that was what Spartan started from, and it was a race that you never really knew. You sort of knew the beginning, you never knew the end, and it was always changing. And there's some crazy things you had to do. You'd do like origami in the middle of the night with a headlamp on and that type of stuff, or we had to roll through a field like kilometer loops 6 times, and we were in the lead. I was there with a couple of buddies of mine. We were in the lead. We got there. The grass was 5 feet tall, probably, and the hottest day ever in June in Vermont, and you're rolling through this stuff and doing that. And believe me, you never want to roll for 5 kilometers.
No, that's a long time.
Growing up, and your equilibrium's all off. So those are some of the crazy ones there.
Yeah.
When you get sort of into the adventure race thing is when you're navigating. And adventure racing is point to point to point to checkpoint to checkpoint to checkpoint with just a map and a compass. And you have to do it with teams of 4. And you do it with one person of the opposite sex. And we would and you have to stay together. It's not a relay. Mm-hmm. So you have to stay together. You have to stay as a team.
Group dynamics, team dynamics.
Exactly. So that was one of the first nights we were on the water coming across Moosehead Lake in Maine, which is the biggest body of water inland Maine. And the wind picked up to like 60, 70 miles an hour, surfing a canoe down these waves.
Wow.
And Shelly, the female in our team, talked some sense into us and was like, guys, pull over. We'll wait till light comes up and the wind dies down. So that was one good one. And then, we've been phenomenally lost. It always seems to rain during these things, like on cue, like the hardest rains you've ever seen ever. And I don't know how it happens, but
gotta have a little mud, right?
It does. So, but it makes, but it creates a level of resiliency. It creates a level of thinking outside the box. What are you going to do? What are you not going to do? Funny story is one night I could tell everyone was getting fatigued. It had been raining. We're going through it was pre-summer, going through this sort of lake community in central New Hampshire. And there was this motor lodge. And the guys were pulling over for the night. So we got in bed for like 6-7 hours, slept, got up, took off the next morning. And the thing about adventure racing is as long as it's available to everyone, everything's fair game. So,
that's great.
Stories.
That's good. Hey, so what's an ultra like, right? So you've done some of these ultra runs where you've just run for days, right? What are those like?
Well, then that's really what the adventure racing is. It's ultra. It's 300-400 miles, right? You're going. I've never done say an ultra marathon, 100-mile race or anything like that, but it's interesting because you're dealing with sleep issues, you're dealing with hallucination, you're dealing with
poor judgment,
great judgment, right? Sometimes you're lucky and sometimes the shit hits the fan, and you go through all level of emotion. And the crazy thing is when you're there, it sucks. You're like, oh, blah, 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 I'm never going to do this again. But when you hit the finish line and you have a beer, you're already talking about the next one. It's sort of like having kids. Of how bad it sucked, but then you're ready for the next one.
And so speaking of that, the Spartan race, that became a brand, that became like the gold standard for the adventure races, became a big one. It's highly televised. It's became a huge, giant international brand now, right? You got in early with those folks. You become one of their family members. I've seen some videos of you where they're referencing you like you're one of the guys on the team there. So tell us, how'd you get involved with the Spartan?
So the whole thing started again through the death race thing. And then there's a long story, a couple interesting stories there. I won we had won a couple of Joe DeSena put up 15 grand for a team race, and two guys I'd raced with came back and we won $5,000 a piece. So that's my biggest one day of money in any sport. But it was, but Joe, the leaders that are over there, Joe and some of the other guys, I just connected with, because we're sort of all type A personalities doing a million things, going in a million different directions, and really understanding the resiliency piece, the grit piece, what it's like to suffer and to endure. And when we can talk a lot about that between us of what's going on, but we try to spread that message the best as possible. So it's a blast. It's fun. I'm actually doing a thing next week with their Resilience Academy that they're launching, to be like, hey, we got to get through this, what we're doing right now in the COVID thing. You got to be resilient. You got to think outside the box. You got to have a little bit of grit, and hopefully come out the other side better than you went in.
Yeah. The book by Duckworth, the Grit book, that's amazing concept there. And I've always thought that. And my dad said it a different way when I was a kid. Shit happens, now what? Right? And so that was his whole way of saying adversity, you got to be prepared for adversity. And those that deal, right? And so grit is a very underestimated trait, I think, in the work world in particular. It's the most important thing. And here we are faced with some massive adversity that everybody had to deal with and is in the middle of dealing with. And we'll see who has grit and resilience and who doesn't, right? There's a perfect transition here to another concept I wanted to ask you about. You're what I call a hard charger, right? There's no question about that. You have a morning routine, you get up, you work out. You and I spoke at length about some of those values that we have. You work hard at your career, you work hard at athletics. Tell me about your mindset there, and how have you transitioned that into a healthy lifestyle?
No, so I'd like to say it's balance, right? But and balance is in so many different things. But for me, I sort of have three pieces of the puzzle: sort of family, finances, and fitness, and all of those have each little things that go off of it. But I try to keep all of those in balance the best that I can. When it comes to family, we're always going skiing together as a family. We're like the master of road trips. We figured this stuff out and try to do that. Right now we're in the middle of the COVID thing. So, the family thing is good and bad, and people get on each other's nerves, but you do the best you can. Finances sort of comes in the career piece, right? Because without being a hard charger or making money, all the other things really, the wheels blow off and it's not that much fun. So I make that a significant portion of my life. How can I make money but still do what I want to do? And then the fitness piece is probably, the fitness and health piece is what really supercharges the others. And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't.
It's amazing. It's the engine that runs it all, right?
Yeah. It's if you're not healthy, if you're not fit, if you don't have stamina, you're going to be taken out at the knees from all the other stuff. And that's sort of the engine that drives it, that, like I said, people don't really think about that as it. They think of it's work. It's work. It's a chore, right? Yeah.
It's something I have to do. That's right. What people think. That's the difference. For me, it's where all the thoughts happen. It's where all the creative juices flow, right? It's where I find my drive. It's the engine. It's the engine that runs. And if I don't let that engine run, right away in the morning, I'm off. My cylinders are firing different. I mean, I have empirical evidence throughout my life that suggests that if I don't work out and sweat significantly in the morning, it's not a great day. It's not as good a day as it could be.
It's so imperative. In my routine's a little bit different, but I'd like to get up and I start working right away. Where when I grew up in high school and college and everything else, I always did my homework in the morning because I didn't have the mental capacity at night. I'm tired.
I want to get it over with.
Trained. Did all that. So I'd get up and do my work. And then what I'll do is I'll do that, get the kids to the bus or whatever, make lunches, go work hard till like 11:30. But then if I want to go for an hour and a half bike ride or a 2 hour bike ride or run or work out in the gym or something, I have that time because I've already, preempted it on the other side.
Right.
Then I was telling this to my wife the other day, if you're not ready for bed by 8:30 or 9, you haven't really worked hard enough. and that's my philosophy. There's people that, they love to work from 11 to 4 in the morning. Right. Yeah. And that's their thing. So it's what works well for me.
You've got a groove and you've got it down to, your top 3. I have 3. Dave Rhoades has 3. Everybody I know has a couple core tenets. Mine are body, mind, and spirit. And I break my categories down. I set goals accordingly to those. And it sounds like you do the exact same thing. And so I didn't have to reach far to ask this question because it seemed like you wear it. You wear it on your chest here. Family, finances, and fitness, and those are the buckets. Those are the 3 areas which you can make goals and set things going. But I love it. I have a morning routine. Everybody I know gets into one and has one, and then love the different nuances there. Talk to me about your professional goal setting approach, right? So I know from listening to the podcast that you're definitely a goal oriented and very successful individual, what you do work wise. And that's typical for folks that are sports minded. I think they have athletic goal. You set you training goals to get to that goal. Then you go and achieve the race. And like you said, you're having your first beer and you're already planning your next race, right? So that's kind of how goal setting goes. What's your thought at professional goal setting?
We're sales guys and what we're doing. And I
think everybody's in sales at some level, right?
Well, you're either making the company money or you're saving the company money. And if you're not doing one of those, you're non-essential. And I think people don't realize that either. It's, you just don't go to work and get a paycheck. People don't need you if you're not doing one of those 2 things. But separately, I'm always, I have a number I want to hit and I put it out there every year. But then it's just the journey along the way. If you focus on the journey, the end number will come. And this year, my number was going to be way bigger than, what I wanted to do last year. And then the COVID thing hit, right? So my journey's actually shifted and gone in a little bit different direction. But it's realizing that the goal is it's a moment in time. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's like all of a sudden you hit, say you make $1 million a year, or you buy the house, or you do that. So you make $1 million a year on December 31st, it's January 1. What's next? Where are you going to go from there? Because if you're going to celebrate that $1 million a year, that's going to be gone by February because you haven't done anything to get ready for the next year.
Right.
So that's how I try to do it and sort of, I put it out there and hard charge. I remember listening to Bodie Miller, the skier, total rock star, iconoclast skier. Yeah. And he's like, actually, I don't even set goals. I just go out and go as hard as I can and sort of let the results fly, sort of land where they are. Yeah. And I do have a portion of that. It's like, hey, you go out there, you do the right things every day, you show up, your target of what you're thinking is going to come to you. Instead of saying, all right, I need to hit 10 calls here, 10 calls there, then because what if you don't, right? Are you going to stay up till 3 a.m. just trying to do that to the next? No, it's, to me, it's different, right? It's all about what is in the journey, where are we going to go? Because if you look at a plane flying from LA to Boston, the thing has been all over the place, but ends up in their destination. So it's sort of the same thing that, how I look at it.
Yep. I think you have to allow some room for the magic to happen, right? And so if you get lost in that every day, every minutia goal of grinding these different things to these different metrics, you sometimes lose the ability to have the magic happen, right? Exactly. I believe in holding that goal out there, right? The vision, and getting into action and having a plan of action of what I'm going to do to get there. But I do not connect the dots all the way. So let's use that $1 million a year analogy. The goal is $1 million a year. I don't have to back end like a sales plan, a traditional sales plan, each quarter, each month, each week of what I need to do to get to that number. And am I on track or am I not on track? Hey man, $1 million is going to happen. And if that's the case, COVID or no COVID, year ain't over, right? We're only in the end of May right now. So Miracles can happen and will happen. And so I believe in that. But
So true.
it all falls apart if you don't have that daily grind, right? If you do not know what you're going to do today to put you in action toward that goal, then you're going to be a little bit of Bodie Miller, and there's going to be times where you have epic fails at races, right?
Exactly. No, but I'm a big sort of fan of the law of attraction, right? And you sort of put it out there, it'll happen. And what's crazy is once you really start paying attention to it, it's truly remarkable. Like thoughts are things, and that like, oh, I was thinking about so and so the other day, and someone I haven't even talked to in like 20 years. Next thing you know, I get like an email from them, right? Or
serendipitous moments, or God shots, or whatever you want to call those.
But if you sit back and you really look at a lot of these, it's amazing how often they show up versus just like, oh, okay.
That's right. Exactly what I'm talking about. And that happens during the flow state, I call it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And if you don't allow for flow, you're all grind all the time. You're going to be Gary Vaynerchuk, and you're going to work until your eyeballs bleed. And, he's successful, but I want to allow a little magic in there. And it happens with those exactly as you described, that email, that phone call when you're thinking about somebody. And those happen to me. Those happen to me on the daily. And that's a good litmus test for me to know that life is working, like it's working the way it should be. So you've mentioned the COVID environment, right? I call it the post-quarantine now. I'm optimistic. We're getting out of this quarantine.
Yeah.
So I'm calling it post-quarantine. So let's talk about some of the growth sectors professionally, like that you're seeing right now. So you're on the front end. You have clients that are reaching out saying, hey, we're going to have somebody we need to fill a position for. What's happening right now? What are you seeing?
Some markets are going to get whacked. They're going to, are going to get hard and might not even exist anymore, but it's building new markets that we've never even known existed on the other end. If you said 2 months ago or now 3 months ago that 100% of the kids in the U.S. are going to be homeschooled and that 85 to 90% of the people are going to be working from home, you'd be like, that's impossible. And that can't happen. Well, it happened over a weekend, right? So it took 3 or 4 days for everyone to get back in the groove, and we were ready to go. And it's going to change what we're doing right now. Like before we chatted, I've done more video calls than I even talk on my cell phone, because it's ways for people to connect. My fifth grader upstairs on a Zoom call right now for school. It's going to be, remote learning is going to be different. The colleges are going to be different. I wouldn't want to be in the college business, the suit business, or the commercial real estate business moving forward, because they're all going to be facing some significant issues. I think, but with that being said, I think companies are going to become more efficient. They're going to become, people are going to work sort of how their lifestyles work. Like I was saying earlier, I love to get up early and work early in the morning and bang out at lunch and then, wrap up at 5 or 6. But there's going to be coders who love starting to work at 6 p.m. and work till 6 a.m. because they're night owls and they love Red Bull and that's their thing and they like to sleep all day. But if organizations really start allowing people to perform at their sort of natural circadian rhythm, and I think you're going to see that more and more, they're going to become much more efficient.
Oh, for sure.
So that's, I'm seeing that moving forward, and the advent of new networking and new technology and everything else, I think, is just at the beginning.
I would wholeheartedly agree. You mentioned on something how fast we went from kids in school to kids that were working from home, right? Our kids taking classes from home. And we did it overnight. We most companies I wouldn't say easily, but very quickly transitioned to a work from home environment within a week or so. There were some road bumps with some clients, but the vast majority of my clients were way ahead of that game, utilizing these tools, right? Ring Central, Zoom, Teams, what have you, to have these remote workforce. They dialed in some security policies pretty quickly and got everybody access, and people were up and running. And I think that changed for a lot of my clients a paradigm shift of how quickly we can get something done, right? There used to be these, well, we don't have the appetite to make a change that big or that quickly. I think that paradigm's gone. I think today people are like, wow, we just moved mountains quickly, changed our business, changed in some cases. I know clients that have changed significant strategy in the middle of this and I've seen upside on it, right? Some reactive, some proactive, and where they're going to markets and do things. So I think that art of possible is changing. And I think people now, some of my clients were mentioning in one of my networking groups the other night, they feel much more optimistic about their ability to get stuff done because they think they just went through a big exercise and they just proved that they could do it, you know?
Oh, no, it's crazy of how fast and it sort of goes back to what we were talking about before, the resilience of sort of humans. And it's like, hey, you know what? Now we got to do it regardless. And let's just figure it out.
Yeah. Dave Rhoades challenged me the other day. I stated something like I needed to save a chunk of dollars, right, for Uncle Sam that I needed to pay. And he said, if you needed that money for a loved one's organ, you'd find it, right? You'd find it like right away. And so it just changes the paradigm, And the other big takeaway I have here from the quarantine, if you will, is geography. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. We're having a podcast. We're looking at each other. You're in my office right now. I'm in your office. I'm reading your Tim Ferriss book in your library. We could have a long conversation around that. So we're bonding across the country, right? So that's changed a paradigm for me personally. 99% of my clientele was in Orange County, Southern California, right? Pre-quarantine. I've picked up several clients now that are I'm not in a car, ability to get in a car and go see, right? They are much further away than that. I'd have to jump on a plane and make some travel. And I don't see that happening anytime soon, right? I see us continuing to do this mode of business. And I think it's going to make me personally much more productive and much more, give me a much broader range of folks to meet with.
Well, and that's exactly it. It's crazy, and focus on that for a second. So I've done executive search all over the globe, and you deal with people in Asia, Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe. They were using Skype, Zoom, and WhatsApp way before we were as Americans, because that's how they communicated back home, back to here. So there was a level of comfort that they had that we wouldn't, that we don't have, or we didn't have, 3 months ago. And now every call is video based, or most of the calls that I'm having, because because people would always worry about what are they wearing? What's their background look like? What happens if the dog comes in? And that's all sort of thrown out the window.
Oh, completely. People are putting their kids on their laps now. They're putting their dogs on their lap just to get it out of the room. I had an email exchange this morning where one of the reps was saying, "I'm sorry, I was away from my phone feeding the baby." Right? You didn't hear that in your conversation in an email before this.
Not at all. No. And I think that's what's sort of cool about this whole thing too. I think there's gonna be a different vibe.
Yeah. I work-life blend is there. I think it's more intimate. You're in people's houses right now, right? People are in your house or in your living room. And so very early on, we put our whole team together on a call, and, there was some coaching opportunity. I was like, hey man, make your bed, you don't want to have your unmade bed in the background. It doesn't set the right tone. So things like that, it's going to be very different for folks. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, people are going to have a presentable workspace to have these video calls. But it's definitely changing the way things are going here. As a guy who is placing people and finding people for the right roles, a lot of the folks that are going to be listening to this podcast here are either in transition or evaluating a transition in their career. What advice do you have for those folks as the coach that you are?
Well, I think right now you got to build your personal brand. I think there's been no better time than ever to do it. You have the access to, Zoom is free. You can record your own videos. You can reach out to people, but you need to build in a LinkedIn profile. You need to get your own buy your domain name. KenLubin.com or .net. I have .net. I can't find the guy who's got .com, which for some reason, I don't know why he has it. But, so then, and think about really becoming a thought leader. You can do quick videos. You can do quick writing. You can have an opportunity to be in front of people that you never had before by doing everything with completely free tools that are in front of you. That's, I think, if you're considering a transition or are out of work looking for that, you really need to start thinking about that. And a lot of people I don't know how to do that, or I don't know where to begin. And it's just start, right? Just write a quick snippet of something and put it on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm, software guy. And all of a sudden you're talking about XYZ software. Well, at that point, you're declaring yourself an expert, regardless if you're an expert or not. It doesn't really matter. And that's the other thing, is declare yourself an expert in something, right? Declare yourself an expert in the field of whatever you are. Or if you want to say, I love crocheting, declare yourself, go create a crochet blog that's bigger and better and faster than anyone else. That is free tools through Weebly or Wix, and you can do everything there. That's how easy it is. And it's crazy. And it's crazy to me if, you can sit down for an hour and sort of play around and watch YouTube videos and have a website set up. That's the advice I'm giving people right now, is to declare themselves the expert. And then lastly is create a value statement instead of a resume. What value have you brought your organization? And a little bit, like I was saying earlier, how much money have you made the company? How much money have you saved the company? And what's sort of the delta in between? Because those are what people are buying. Unless, when you're going to get hired by someone, they're buying your value, right? Is what value you bring into them versus, resumes that all say the same. I holistically grew this business, blah, 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 blah. And no one really means anything. So.
That's amazing. That value statement, you put a completely different spin on it. Instead of the value statement of, I'm Mike, I bring this and that to the table, right? You're like, I'm Mike and I brought this to my last role, right? And I brought this to the role before that. And here's what I'm going to bring to you. That puts it in dollar and cents terminology. That's very good advice, Ken. Yeah.
So it's, and I had learned that from, I forgot what book it was, listening, like one of the old Nightingale books or something from way back when people were standing in line in depression, give me a job. And then the guy who wrote down on his paper, well, here's what I can bring to you and how I can make you money. They hired that guy versus the people in line saying, hey, give me a job.
Sure. That's amazing. Well, I sure enjoyed our time here today. I look forward to listening to more and more of your podcast here. I don't know that I'm going to be jumping in any one of those ultra races right now. We do things a little different here in SoCal. There are a lot of paddle boarding and we do some adventures. Like we hiked up, Dave and I hiked up Mount Baldy the other day. But nice. An ultra multi-day adventure race is definitely something that could be on the horizon here. So I look forward to chatting with you about some of that. And good luck with the Executive Athletes and the Ultimate Hire podcast. And folks can find those both out there in the media and all your usual media. I listen to them on iTunes. So check those out. And Ken, really good talking with you. People can find you at ZRG Partners. And I'll leave in the show notes here your email address. Appreciate the time and all the advice here.
This has been great. Thank you. It's been a blast. It's nice to sometimes be on the other side of the mic. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Appreciate the time. Thanks, Ken. Hey, Mike here. Hope you liked this boardroom session. Please check back to our future sessions as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at SIDEPATH.com.